rubbed my eyes. We will wait a few minutes.
Sure.
It's on the floor. Here in the corridor.
Okay, počinjem polako. We will wait a few minutes, 1 minute. Doman method Adria is started seeing us.
Sanja. Ova devika što mi radi. Što mi država taj.
Okay.
Ja ću se sad
Welcome everybody. Prvo ćemo ovako na srpskom. Dobroveče svima. Hvala vam puno što prisustvujete večerašnjem live-u. Nadam se da nemate zamerku što ćemo pričati na engleskom jeziku, prosto je tako lakše. Ovo će u svakom slučaju biti sačuvano na YouTube kanalu, segmenti će biti prikazani na Instagramu. Za one koji ne razumeju dobro engleski, potrudit ću se da bude sa prevodom, ali večeras sa mojom gošćom želim da pričam isključivo na engleskom jeziku. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to be heard about a method that's very different from everything I've heard so far. I have a lot of specialists I have talked to, and everybody has their point of view about autism.
Yeah.
And as a parent, I know it's very difficult to search. But when I saw the video on YouTube, you were always smiling, and there's always a happy moments on those videos that gave me the green light to be bold and ask you to give me the honor to pass your knowledge to our followers. So thank you for tonight.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to a lot of parents, and hopefully they find it to be helpful.
I hope so too, and I know it would. So please, I know it's a family matter,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
It all started with your grandfather. So can you please tell us what year started with him?
Sure.
How long is Doman method familiar to parents, and how you decided to be the one who will help the parents and their children with autism?
Yeah. So it all started with my grandfather, as you said, Glen Doman, who was a physical therapist. And in the 1950s, he was very frustrated that many of the things that he had learned in school and was practicing with his patients wasn't actually producing results, right? And so at that time, most of his work actually was with people with brain injury, okay? People who had had strokes and had lost their mobility and their speech. And so, but he found what he was doing wasn't really helping them very much. And so, fortunately, my grandfather was a good combination of courageous and also impatient. And so when things didn't work, he essentially created his own methodology. And the basis of all of his treatment, everything, was brain development. How can we develop the brain? Because at that time, it doesn't matter if it was a child had autism or cerebral palsy or developmental delay. All of these conditions at that time were viewed as hopeless. These children cannot be helped. And even to this day, many people still hold that view toward these children.
And that was what year?
So 1955, let's say.
55, okay.
Yeah. And so
how that long period, and still people are saying that there's no help for our children, but there is.
There is, yes. And the reason why there's hope is because of a phenomenon called neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change. So the brains of humans especially, but even all mammals, can change based on activities that that person engages in, can change the brain, and also stimulation can also change the brain. And so he discovered this, and when he put this into practice with his patients, he found he got great results because the root cause of their problem is in the brain. And even if we're talking specifically about children with autism, because you said many of the people you speak to have different ideas about what autism is, we have found it to be a neurodevelopmental condition. Neuro meaning the brain and development being development.
Yes.
In our books, we talk about the science behind that. There's a pretty modern form of brain imaging called functional MRI, which shows that the brains of these children are different than other people.
Okay.
That's certain.
So it's possible to see on MRI.
Yeah, on functional MRI. Okay. Functional MRI is, so an MRI basically shows a picture of the brain.
Yes.
But a functional MRI is a much more sophisticated form of technology that shows what parts of the brain are active, okay, and which parts of the brain are basically dormant. And so functional MRI showed that the brains of children with autism function differently than other brains.
Yes.
In MRI, because it's just a picture, might look the same. But functional MRI shows us their brains function in a very different way.
Yes.
And so what our program is focused on is how can we get the brains of these children to behave and function like the brains of others.
Like, can we call it reprogramming the brain?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in fact, the Doman method, we call it a program.
Yes.
Because that's essentially what we're trying to do, reprogram
Yes.
the brain.
So it started with your grandfather,
Right.
and next it continued with your father.
Correct.
And
yeah.
I saw in video that during your childhood, you were always visiting those institutes where they worked,
Yeah.
and that's how you were introduced to our children. I mean, when I say our children, I mean all children that have some disability.
Yeah.
So, how did you recognize it was your calling?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes children, when they're around the children that are different, usually are saying, okay, I had it for a while, I don't need it anymore, but you decided it will be your life calling. So
Yes.
how did you get to that point?
Yeah. So I had an amazing childhood, a very special childhood, because my grandparents and my parents had a kind of personal philosophy that their children should be able to observe what they do on an everyday basis. So my grandparents and my parents had basically an open door office policy for their children. So we could come in and sit in their office and watch them as they worked with families. And as long as we didn't interrupt. That was the only rule. You can watch but not interrupt. And by the way, even when we were small children, the families loved to see that the children of the people they were working with were interested. And very often, my parents and grandparents would use me and my brothers and sisters as a example for the other parents to say, if they wanted to show the parents how to do a technique, they would use us, And so we were teachers at a young age. We were being included, And so, but I also got to spend a lot of time with special needs children, and many of the children were very severely injured, So some, we're talking about children with autism who had no speaking ability, or children with cerebral palsy who couldn't walk, or children with Down syndrome who couldn't read, many different kinds of children. But I had the opportunity to spend time with them and play with them. And during that time, I grew a huge respect for the children themselves. They were my friends. And as a child, you don't really think of other children as different. You just assume they're like everyone else.
That was my next question. What's the difference between seeing those children when you were young and a child, and how do you see them now? Is there a difference or no? Are you looking them same like you looked them when you were a child?
Well, that's a good question. Honestly, I've never thought about it before. I think it's more the same than different, in the sense that I always had a huge amount of respect for the children. I think that maybe now I'm a bit older and maybe a bit wiser, maybe, and I'm more emotionally touched by the children and the changes that I see. I think as a child, I got to watch, 8-year-old children who are spastic take their first steps. I got to see children with autism at 12 say their first words.
You were witnessing the miracles.
I was witnessing the miracles. But, as a child, of course I knew they were special, but you don't really understand it, But as an adult, when you see it and you understand the work that went into it and what it means to the families, it touches your heart in a completely different way.
The question I want to explain, because there's one video that circles on YouTube about 10 years now, when children are looking at a child that has Down syndrome, and when that child smiles, the other child smiles, neurotypical child, but mom and dad, they're stop smiling. That's why I asked that, because when we are children, we don't see differences. We see the other child the same as we are,
right.
Also wants to play, also wants to talk, also wants intention, love. But when we grow older, we are starting to see the inability of the children,
right.
And that's when starts discrimination, segregation, and it's so amazing for me to see that you look at our children with the same enthusiasm and same love like when you were a child.
Yeah.
So what's the difference in brain between a neurotypical child and a child that has any kind of disability, to say like that?
Well, it completely depends on the disability, okay? But if we take autism, for example, we know from functional MRI that certain areas of their brain are underdeveloped, okay? So the way our brain works is we have brain cells called neurons, and they connect with one another. They basically have branches where the different brain cells connect and send signals across the brain. And that's how our brain functions. But in some areas of the autistic brain, it is underdeveloped, so there's not as much connectivity. And then there are other areas of the brain that are kind of over-connected, okay? And so this creates a lot of chaos for the individual.
There is no middle.
There's
just not ability and too much ability, not the middle.
Basically, yes, yeah, in various areas of the brain, right? And so that can create problems. In some areas, like in speech development, they might be behind their peers, right?
Sensory problems.
Sensory, right? But then there might be other areas where there's too much connectivity, which might lead to hyperactivity or difficulty with, social interaction, or sometimes even hypersensitivity. Some children are overly sensitive to sounds, and so
covering their ears.
Covering their ears, exactly. And so that's that example. Now there are other kinds of neurodevelopmental issues where the children have sustained damage to the brain. Many brain cells have died. And so for those children, our program is more just about creating connections. But for children with autism, it's both about creating connections, but then also how can we provide other it's pretty scientific, but basically there's another aspect to our brain development, okay, which for a typical child happens a lot in that 18 months to 3-year-old time span, where essentially the brain goes in and does what's called pruning, where there are certain connections which are essentially severed.
They're learning in their movement like a sponge, taking everything that surrounds them, but our children do everything, how do I say it, mechanically. We have to take their arms to take the thing to show them how, but neurotypical child will take by its own and look for it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so essentially what our program is, what we're always trying to do is, how can we get the best possible results, right? How can we improve brain function so that the symptoms go away? So with children with autism, how do we get that child, how can we improve brain function to get that child speaking better so that they can begin socializing with others, so that they can hear like other children, so they can read and learn. So that's the main goal.
But there's something that's confusing for me, and I would like to ask that. You said some neurons die. What's the cause of that?
Yeah.
How does it happen? Because it's almost like we say someone got a stroke, brain stroke, and neurons die. Because we have older person that can move their arm, can't move their leg, can't stop speaking because they have a brain damage by a stroke. So how does it happen to autistic children when they don't have stroke? What happens in their brain to cause the neurons to die?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is a little frustrating, because it can be a variety of reasons, and it's not always clear for a specific child what the reason is. But for some children, I would say the majority of children, it's because at some point in their development, they suffered from hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen. It could be during the pregnancy or during the birthing process, or maybe perhaps even immediately after. But for the majority of children, that's the reason why there's cell death.
Yes. So we usually hear in media, or we usually hear from some experts, neurons can get, we can't make the brain function again, but we hear from your method there are so many children that they made it.
Right.
So is it possible?
Yeah.
Or what happens? Do you make those neurons that died to come alive again? So I don't know what the other word to say. Or the other part of the brain takes that part of the dead side of the brain.
Yeah, it's the second one, because when a cell dies, a brain cell dies, you can't bring it back to life. But what you can do through neuroplasticity is improve the connectivity and the function of all the other cells. Okay, because essentially the way that let's take the example of muscles, okay? Like a bicep, okay? So we all have the same number of muscle fibers in our bicep, okay? Yes. So why do some people have huge biceps and other people have small biceps, okay? It's because the people with huge biceps lift weights, right? They lift heavier weight, they do it more often, okay? For longer periods of time. And so their fibers over time become larger and stronger and better, okay? Yes. So what we essentially do is we say, okay, what are the weights that we could essentially have a brain lift? How could we get the brain to function? Like, how can we get the brain cell to work better, be stronger, be connected with other brain cells? So yeah, and that's what neuroplasticity is.
It's almost, it sounds like the lungs with my child. He stopped breathing and he went on that
on a ventilator.
Vent, yes. So left side stopped working, but the right side took over its side and left side.
Exactly.
So the brain works the same way.
Right. Yeah, essentially, yes. The brain, if there are regions of the brain that are injured, other areas of the brain can often even take over the functions for that area of the brain.
That's so amazing, because usually they say when it's dead, but it's... is there a period when we say it's over, what we have done till that time of age, we have done? Or there's no limit?
There's no limit. We work with children and with adults of all ages. Okay. We have, people on our program in their 30s and 40s even. The most important thing specifically for our program actually has nothing to do with the age of the patient or the individual. It has to do with the family around them. Does that child or adult have a support system around them of people who could help out with our program? So
your program is not only about the child, you support whole family.
That's right. And our program is a family program.
Yes.
Because it is an intensive program. Okay. It is a program that requires time. It requires repetition. And by the way, our goal with our program, of course, is how do we get the best results in the least amount of effort, right? That's the goal.
Yes.
But where we are right now in our scientific understanding, a lot of the treatments that are most effective that we found for autism or other special needs, they require time and effort. And hopefully one day we'll have that magic pill that fixes everything, but we're not there yet.
Yes.
And in the meantime, I think we've tried our very best to have the best possible solution at our fingertips.
That's very encouraging, because people usually, when you say to them, there's no magic pill, you have to work. You have to make an effort for you, for your child. And usually they start, and when they see it takes time, they start to ask themselves, is it okay? Too many questions like, when is it going to happen? Is it now? Is it now? How long? Do you have those questions?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, those, and these are the most common questions we get from parents as they're starting out our program.
They want now and at the moment.
Sure, of course, and that's understandable. If I were in their place, I would be asking the same thing. What we say is success creates motivation. Success creates motivation. So when parents start to see success, they're motivated to keep going.
That's right.
And so that's why it's so important if families can get started, even if they can do our program for maybe, let's say, 6 to 12 weeks. Very often, families, even in that amount of time, start to see success. And then they say, oh, my child started doing something they've never done before. It could be something like the child made eye contact, or the child said a word, or the child followed an instruction for the first time, whatever it is. For each child, it's different. But when the parents see that, they go, okay, maybe we're not crazy. Maybe this actually does something. Let's keep going.
Say it again.
Yeah, exactly. And so when they feel successful, they're motivated to keep going. So that's the crucial thing.
So can I ask more about the method?
Yeah.
How long the program lasts?
Lasts, yeah. By the
Sorry
way,
for my English.
But by the way, your questions are excellent, because they're the kinds of questions parents ask. A lot of interviewers don't ask these questions because they don't know how parents think, So the answer to your question is a frustrating answer, which is it completely depends on the child.
Okay.
Okay, because children respond to our program at different rates. Okay. If you ask me what is my number...
Does that depend on the age of the child or...
No, it depends on a variety of factors. So it could depend on the consistency that parents are able to do the program, or the number of hours a day that the parents can do. But the thing is, it's not just that. The biggest thing is something that we cannot yet measure. It's my biggest frustration in my life, is that we cannot yet predict which child will succeed, okay, and how quickly they will succeed. There's something within the child themselves, okay, that we cannot measure yet, okay? It's beyond our scientific understanding. And so, just to give you an example, we might take two children with very similar symptoms of autism, and they start the program at the same time, and maybe one child in a year will go from not speaking to speaking in sentences. And then another child might only start speaking 5 words, okay? And if you say to me, Spencer, you're the expert in the Doman method, why did this child do this and this child do this? And I don't have an answer for you.
It's usually frustrating for parents, and I figured it out by myself when I took my child to a specialist, and my child started the same time as the other child. The other child did not have at all speaking ability, and the time passes by. My child is still tapping in the spot, and that child started talking so much sentences, and I was always wondering, am I doing something wrong? What's the difference? How? But then our specialists learned us not to look our child and by the other child. I don't know how to say that. Not to compare them.
Yeah.
But to compare our child from the last period we saw some progress, and we will see small steps, maybe not big steps, but small steps.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Do you also tell that to your parents, or you have some other advice how to cope with that feeling that maybe because we live with our child 24 hours and we are not always able to see that progress, and some other people who are seeing us one in a month, they see the progress, and how to cope with that feeling that maybe we're not doing enough. Is he doing better or not, or she? How do you tell your parents which are in your program how to cope with that feeling?
Yeah. So the story that you just told is a story that I've probably heard 1,000 times, where, you know, a mother goes to the doctor at 1 year of age and says, "Doctor, I think my child is a little bit behind the other kids. There's something wrong, but I don't know what it is." And the doctor will say, "Oh, your child's fine, come back in 6 months." So mom comes back 6 months later. She says, "Doctor, now I know there's something wrong. Like my child isn't saying some words, or my child isn't making eye contact." And the doctor says, "All children develop differently. All mothers worry about this, you know."
And time passes by.
And time passes. So then the mom comes back 6 months later and she says, "Okay, doctor, now I know there's something wrong. And if you don't figure out what it is, I'll find a doctor who can."
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, the doctor gets serious and says, "Okay, your child has autism or developmental delay." And so, by the way, with every family, 35,000 families who have done the Doman method over the last 60 years.
35,000.
35,000. We ask.
It's an amazing number.
Yeah, it is. And we ask every family, who was the first person who realized that your child had a problem? And 80% of the time it's mother. 80%. Not pediatrician or teacher.
Yes, I saw something, but my father, Luca's grandfather, saw.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so mother is number 1, grandmother is number 2.
Because I was so negative.
Yeah.
They will keep telling me,
Yeah.
he has a problem. No.
No,
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
So that is what parents are commonly told. To give you the answer, when we are looking at a child's development, we feel the only way to fairly evaluate where that child is comparing them to their age level peers. So how is this child doing compared to their peers? And so we actually have a document, which is called a developmental profile, that has all of the kind of major milestones in child development. And so, and the ages that children reach those milestones. And then we take a child, and when we're seeing them for the first time, and we say, okay, which of these milestones has the child achieved? Mm-hmm. This is very important for us. How is this child compared to their peers in speech, in, intellectual development, in manual development, in mobility? And it gives us a very clear, objective picture about where the child is in their development.
That's very good. So parents could actually see
on the document,
because
how
it's
their child is
easier
doing.
to see than just to say, oh, it's good. He's doing or she's doing great.
Yes.
But you don't have anything to see. But in that portfolio, they see their child's development. So okay.
Exactly.
We're going somewhere.
Exactly.
So, your team consists of?
Yeah. So we have about 25 different staff on our team. Our team is really the strength of who we are. I know the name Doman is on everything, but Domans represent actually a very small percentage of who we are. Our team, we come from a variety of different backgrounds, from special educators to doctors, to teachers, to nurses, to nutritionists. So we come from a wide variety of backgrounds. But the Doman method itself basically has 4 pillars, okay? Four different programs that we use with children to stimulate their development. The first is cognitive development, right? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about cognitive development, how can we get this child understanding like other children, reading, doing math, speaking? Okay, so first pillar is cognitive development. Okay. And so we have a cognitive program. And by the way, sensory development is also in cognitive.
That's yes.
That's
but,
all.
Do parents choose what kind of program they need, or you tell them, or they have all the 4 programs?
So we recommend all 4 programs with each child, because we find that each of these pillars help support the others.
Yes.
Okay. So
stimulating for each.
Exactly. So for example, the second pillar is physical development. Okay. Now, even if a family came to us and said, my child only has cognitive problems, no physical problems. Well, we know that physical activities can help cognitive development, right? Like schools that incorporate regular aerobic activity into their school day have higher test scores, right? Because children need physical activity.
Yes.
So the second pillar is physical, okay? The third is nutrition, okay? So looking at diet and supplementation, like what's the best diet and supplements? Because, outside of the brain, the largest number of neurons are in our digestive tract. Okay.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, sure. There are 500 million neurons in our gut, and so I think most parents of a child with autism at this point have heard of the gut-brain connection.
Yes.
And then the fourth and final one, which is honestly very much unknown to the world except for in the Doman method, is respiration. Okay. So breathing is one of the most important activities, obviously, that we engage in. The human brain can live days or even weeks without food or water, but we can only last maybe 2 to 4 minutes without oxygen.
Yes.
And so we've developed a program called Doman Method Oxygenation, which is a breathing program. It requires a special mask that increases oxygen delivery to the brain. Because the brain's food is oxygen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so through this special program, which my grandfather developed over 50 years ago, we increase oxygen delivery to the brain. And when that happens, we see an improvement in brain function.
So it's, like you said, mostly autistic children do have a problem because they had some oxygen disconnection from their first
Correct.
days. So in that way, you are trying to recharge them with that missing oxygen they had.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And when the brain is well oxygenated also, we find all the other programs get better results. Okay?
yes.
Essentially, it helps
It's
enhance
that-
the
it's
development
brain's
of the
food.
other. It's the brain's food, exactly. Yeah.
So, are the supplements on a must list or no? Does every child need supplementation or not?
It's a good question. And before I even launch into this, my background is
I'm
not.
sorry for interruption because usually when nowadays specialists approve supplements, but back in the history they usually say no. Why do you need that? No, don't use anything. It's autism and it doesn't change. But now it's all the same supplements when you hear the specialists. It's B12, it's zinc, it's vitamin C, and it's magnesium. So are those must have supplements or no?
Yeah, so I don't think we view any supplements as musts, okay? Because I think that, I agree with you. I think that a lot of the time, these like supplement protocols are kind of done blindly in the sense, you have someone who says all children should get this protocol.
Yes.
And even our director of nutrition and health, his name is Dr. Aravind Bagade, has really been looking recently on the different kind of metabolic markers that are presented just within children with autism alone, so that many of these children have different
Needs.
Have different needs. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. And so there's no real cookie cutter approach. So our supplement recommendations are based on different laboratory tests that are done and looking at a child's needs. Now, that being said, some of the things you said, like vitamin C, omega-3s, I think many of the children on our program are prescribed those supplements.
Yes.
But yeah, there's no supplement which is all children must get this. And by the way, I will say that for almost every supplement, I've also seen a child who has a negative response to that supplement.
Yes.
I've even seen children have bad responses to vitamin C at times. So, especially children with autism tend to be very likely to be sensitive to not just the foods they eat, but the supplements they take. And so even supplements need to be added in a careful and safe way to make sure that that child is having a good response to it.
Is there, interrupt me if it's an appropriate task, but is there some food that it's not likable for our children? Like usually they say no milk, no meat, no. Is that the same thing with Doman program, Doman method, or no?
So when children begin our program, we will usually begin an elimination diet with the child. So we will usually say, okay, let's try to take out dairy. Let's try to take out gluten. I would say that even though there's no rule that we would say for every child, I would say things like sugar and artificial, dyes,
Yes.
those we almost in 100% of cases tell parents to take them out.
But when you look like that in that way, we have a problem with
Correct.
white sugar, white
That's
flour,
right. Correct.
and we have gases and rain blackouts with
Correct.
those kinds of foods. So
Right, and they create inflammatory responses, and especially for children diagnosed with autism, that's really problematic.
inflammatory responses, like inflammatory for guts or
In the
for
gut.
brains.
Both, yeah.
Brains also have inflammatory reactions on food.
It's very possible. Yeah, that basically that foods that are inflammatory, because of the gut-brain connection, can create changes in the brain itself. And this actually has been pretty well documented in the scientific literature. Research has shown there are 5 different things that can change function in the brain. Okay, the first is diet. The second is physical activity. The third is cognitive stimulation. The fourth is challenge. Anything that challenges the individual. Okay, because challenge is good. It's kind of like with lifting weights for the brain. And then the fifth and final thing is love. Those are the 5 things that, basic categories that have been demonstrated in the scientific literature to change how the brain works.
So help me out now.
Yeah.
You have, I suppose, you have so many wonderful stories about success. Please tell our audience 1 or 2 stories that inspired you, that they were so magical that inspired you to move on in the next level and next level.
Yeah, that's. Well, I mean, the first child, I'm just going to say the first ones that pop into my head. So the first child is Luca. Luca's from Belgrade.
So many Lucas are autistic.
Yeah, oh really?
Yes.
Okay. We don't have that many Lucas in the U.S. But he was diagnosed, was diagnosed with autism. And so he began our program in 2017. When we came to Belgrade for the first time to teach our course, the Doman method course, his mom attended the course and started implementing our program. And I had the pleasure of being Luca's staff coach, which is the person who oversees his progress. And, literally got to watch a child completely change, a child who had really severe social difficulties become charming and be able to make friends and become go from maybe the kid on the outside to a child who can really hold their own and even be the center of attention at times.
That's so inspiring, and that's every parent's wish.
Yeah, that's the dream, right?
Do you have an example for a child that made it to be on its own, to be functional? Because
absolutely,
autism,
independent.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they say once you have autism, you have it for a life.
Yeah.
And it never changes, it just turns to be functional, or it stays not functional. I don't know, do you like those words or not? I use the one that come to my mind, sorry. So, do you have an example for a child that became an adult?
Sure, yeah.
And functional.
Well, I mean, my favorite example of it is a friend of mine. His name is Elliot. When
how old is he?
He's my age, so he's 35. But he and I went to school together. He did our program from the time I think he was maybe 2.5 until he was about 7 years old. So, but he and I attended school. His mother, after he graduated from the program, came and worked with my family. So he and I were schoolmates, and his mother and my parents worked together.
You became a family.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he and I were literally best friends, and are very close friends to this day. And so Elliot went from being what would be called severely autistic The only speech he had was echoing. He echoed back and had severe social deficits, all the way to speaking completely normally. If I brought him here today, you wouldn't you wouldn't notice. He's incredibly articulate, and on the day of his university graduation, I was my wedding day. I got married. I got married kind of young, 22, to my wife, Melissa. So he completed his graduation ceremony, and then he jumped in his car and drove 4 hours to my wedding to make the wedding. And the rest, as they say, is history. But Elliot, lives an independent life. He lives about 15 minutes from me, and is much more intelligent than me in many ways.
I think that's the most inspiring story I ever heard. So thank you for that.
Sure, my pleasure. Can I say one more thing?
Yes,
yeah. So when we were, just to kind of give people an example, when we were 14 years old, he and I were in a play together, like a school play. And in our school, we did Shakespeare plays, which in English is like the highest, it's like the highest, exactly. And so Elliot played the main character in the play. So he played Henry V, who has about 1,000 lines that he had to memorize to say. He's the main character. So yeah, he could do that at 14. So here you have a child who's supposed to not be able to speak and have severe social deficits, and he's in front of a crowd of 200 people delivering 1,000 lines.
Oh my God,
yeah.
that's so inspiring.
Yeah.
So tell me, please.
Yeah.
I will show you the books. Ovo su knjige koji je napisao Spencer. Jednu je napisao on lično, drugu je napisao sa ocem. Tell me, the first book was your grandfather's book, written in what year?
So he wrote his first book about special needs children. It's called What to Do About Your Brain Injured Child.
Yes.
And that was published in 1974.
1974. Today is 2023.
So almost 50 years, yeah.
Yes. And next book is this, with your father, or this
Yes.
one?
So we wrote Answering Autism next. This was published in 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's about?
It's about answering autism.
It's
about the Doman
commonly asked questions and the answers to those questions.
So it's about how the Doman method addresses autism specifically. Okay. Because for a lot of parents, they wanted to know specifically for their child what are the recommended techniques in the Doman method for these children, because we do want to help children with all kinds of neurological conditions. We have many different programs, right? But this is specifically for kids with autism diagnosis.
And the other book?
So yeah, this is the Doman method from special needs to wellness, and this is essentially a book for a child with any kind of neurodevelopmental condition or special need. So even if a child has any developmental delay, a speech delay, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, by the way, there are hundreds of different diagnoses for neurological conditions, but this is basically our book for any parent.
Yes. Okay. So this is primarily it's suggested for parents to buy this one first and this one second, right?
Yeah. Well, I would say by the way, so this book is going to be released in Serbian in a month. Okay?
Yes, thank you for answering.
Yeah, sure. So, basically, I would say for any parent out there, you can't go wrong with this book. Okay? This book is kind of like the foundation of our work. Okay. And we took my grandfather's work and built on it, and it gives you what you would need to know for any child. Okay? The book Answering Autism will be the next book to be published in Serbian, and it'll be released hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. So for people who are following us from different countries, there's the questions how to get the book. If someone wants to get the book in English,
Yes.
They can have it by Amazon.
Yeah, go to Amazon, just search either Answering Autism or the Doman method.
Can you show them both?
Sure,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
And yeah, just you can buy it on Amazon.
Okay.
That's the best way to do it.
And this one will be in what month next?
So Doman method hopefully will be out by the end of April. Okay.
And this by the end
of December. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
In Serbia.
So, now we will... Ako neko ima pitanja, ovako ćemo možda, ako vam je lakše, ako neko ima bilo kakva pitanja, možete i na srpskom jeziku da postavite, ako ne možete na engleskom. Ja ću prevesti i da prosto dobijete odgovore. Ukoliko vam je lakše i na engleskom, slobodno. I was calling them to ask questions if they have. For the ones who don't understand English well, to ask in Serbian freely, and I will translate it. So, with those likes that appeared all the time, I think we almost answered
all the questions.
Yeah. So, there were many positive reactions when we announced live. There were so many positive reactions from patients that are in Belgrade. And they were saying how amazing difference is seen on their child. So here is the question. I don't know how to say it in English.
Hyperbaric oxygen.
Yes, do you recommend it?
So hyperbaric oxygen is a treatment which, yes, can produce results. Okay. Now, what I will say is that as part of the Doman method, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about Doman method oxygenation, and one of the so the Doman method oxygenation can be done at home. Okay, it's also less expensive than hyperbaric oxygen. Okay, and it still provides increased oxygen delivery to the brain. Okay, so when we have a child start our program, we don't use hyperbaric oxygen, okay, because we find that we can get better, faster, less expensive results with Doman method oxygenation. But I do know children who have done hyperbaric oxygen and have also gotten positive results from it. So we don't recommend it. But I don't want to say that it's something bad, because I've spoken to some of the top experts also in hyperbaric oxygen, and I think that that it's possible to get results. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying just to see because they said I missed the questions, and there are questions in previous. Yes, but it's. I'm sorry if someone asks questions, please, again. They said, we also said that we love you and we love the man you're speaking to, and well done. So thank you for the opportunity to say so many great information for us all, because every piece of information gets the puzzle solved and gets the answers.
That's right.
So is there any more questions, or we'll wait one more minute to see if someone will repeat the question? So it's great that we have that first book that your grandfather wrote. It was translated in, mislim da Laguna is the publisher. So will book be translated in Serbian? Da, bit će prevedeno na srpski. Možemo li, can we see the conversation tomorrow? Razgovor ćete vidjeti na YouTube-u, ali će biti segmenata i na Instagramu, tako da, bit će definitivno sačuvan ceo live. I was saying for them it will be saved.
Yeah, even I could get that. I got the context.
Oh, it's those apps. Okay, so it's 10 o'clock. Maybe it's time to leave the honorable guest to have preparation. You are going to India, right? Or
actually, I just came from India.
India, yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to be here in Belgrade for the next few days, and then I'm going on to Zagreb. But we have families coming from all around the Balkans here, and we're going to educate them about the Doman method for their children, and so yeah, that's why we're here.
So people from Croatia, they are coming to Zagreb, and for every questions you have a profile, Doman method Adria ili Doman metod Adria. Možete tamo da pišete, you can write there, and možete da zakažete tamo pregled ili da vidite koji je they are saying it's a great interview, and they're thanking for the opportunity to hear about the program. They were asking, is there a book for German, for people in German?
In
Germany.
So I believe my grandfather's book was has some German, yeah, but it might be out of print. So unfortunately, besides that book, I don't know if there's any others, but they should search.
But they can search it, this one in English on Amazon,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
They were saying they heard about some courses, but is there official certified for Serbia? Or it's, I know what they are saying. Is there a certified for Serbia, or you have your method that's certified for all countries? I'm sorry.
So, if I understand the question correctly,
I don't know if I understood it right, because it said, I will try it one more time. On the internet, there are many courses about the method. Is there an official course?
Yes. So the answer is yes to that question. Yeah. So the official course is a course that we provide online, at different times during the year. It's called the Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness. It's an online course that Doman International offers. And I do have to say that this is important, because there are people out there that kind of pretend to be us. They say, "Oh, we know about the Doman method, we're experts," and unfortunately they take a lot of time and money from parents, and it's not official, and we don't even know these people. People will come to me and say, "Oh, I met your staff member, blah blah blah," and I've never met that person before. So
maybe that's why she asked that kind of question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that if you go to Doman International's website, you fill out the contact form, and our Serbian representative Nika Grgic will contact you and answer all your questions. That's the best way to go.
Nika is a mom of a special needs child, and she's so wonderful, and she connected me to Spencer to have this live. So just saying hi to her. So there's a parent there is asking, where can we find this method? They're in Salzburg.
Okay, so first of all, our first course is online. So that we've done that purposely so parents all over the world can learn about our work. And
that's
so
the base.
That's the base. That's right. So they take our course, and they can start implementing our programs immediately at home. Okay. And then if families want us to see them, okay, and help them with developing a customized program for their child, we have locations around the world where we see families. So for example, Austrian families usually come to our center in Italy, which is our European center.
There's one mom just said, we are coming tomorrow from, tomorrow. Yes, we are coming tomorrow from Germany to Zagreb.
Oh, there you go.
And they're waiting for you.
Yeah, so we're going to see them, sure.
Yes.
So yeah, we really see families from all over Europe. So, when we're here in Serbia and in Croatia, we're seeing families usually from this region. And then most of our European families go to our center in Italy.
That's good to know. They are asking for a name, Serbian page they can ask for. Doman metod Adria. Nika vodi, znači mama Nika vodi tu stranicu, tako da možete se njoj obratiti. Ali kao što i gospodin Spencer rekao, znači postoji zvaničan sajt isto gde znači ljudi koji nisu iz Srbije mogu da prosto popune formular i da dobiju ubrzo odgovor gde mogu da, kako mogu da kažem, da počnu sa kursem. There's so many highs. They're just saying hi.
Can you see there that Nika has put the website?
Kurs na srpskom jeziku i sve informacije na srpskom su na sajtu domanmetod.org. Znači, još jednom, domanmetod.org na srpskom jeziku. Hvala, Nika. Evo. Znači, a na Instagramu možete naći Doman Metod Adria. So, if there's no more questions, I would like to say it was a pleasure and it was inspiring, and thank you for so much useful information and for books that we are expecting, and thank you for the inspiring stories, because that's what makes us go on and gives us the strength to give our children the strength to cope with everything that surrounds them. So it was a pleasure and it was the honor to have this live.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. And, you know, I like I said before, I really appreciate your questions, because I'm used to, you know, I've done interviews before and I'm used to kind of answering the same questions again and again, but it's a parent always asks much more relevant questions. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. This was the first time. I hope it's not the last. And thank you for having me here, and hope we'll have more inspiring information about just the children from Balkans. And thank you one more time.
Thank you.
Nadam se da vam se svima svidelo, hvala svima, znači live će biti sačuvan, još jednom, znači za sve na srpskom jeziku što vas zanima, domanmetodadria.org ili domanmetodadria Instagram profil. Hvala vam još jednom svima, želim vam svima laku noć i nadam se da vam je svima bila inspirativno kao i meni. Laku noć.